right, we are back with a Sunday College Football Playoff Committee special version of the Osceola Seminoles Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm joined by Bob Ferrante, Jerry Cutts, Charles Fishbein, and Nick Carlisle, and we've got Mark Salva in church up in Nashville doing his best to help Florida State. We've got Kurt Weiler still in Charlotte trying to promote some positive energy for Florida State there. Guys, it's going to be an exciting 45 minutes after FSU makes its final case with a 16-6 win in the ACC championship game over Louisville last night. We're going to have our Osceola playoff rankings come out right before the committee does, and it's going to be a fascinating day, guys. From the playoff side of things, there's never been an undefeated Power 5 team left out of the college football playoff, and there's never been an SEC champion left out of the college football playoff today. One of those two things is likely to happen. We'll talk a little bit about that, but Bob and Nick, you guys were with us last night watching the game. Obviously, Jerry and I got a chance with Fish to talk about the performance by FSU's defense and finding just enough offense, particularly in the Wildcat, which I didn't not realize this until I got home last night, that was basically most of the offense for Florida State last night. But it was a historic night for that defense, and you saw unbelievable performance by Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, Patrick Payton, really the whole team. Every segment played well. Just what were y'all's thoughts on the game last night? I'll start with you, Bob.
Yeah, I thought Florida State, the body work all year has suggested this. They are probably the best second half team in college football. I mean, if you're just ranking the very best teams based on how they played third quarter, fourth quarter, Florida State's right up there, probably number one. If I can't imagine anybody has played any better. The defense obviously stole the show and was just remarkable. And I heard you guys talking about it. That was just a historic performance in a championship setting. I think we have to kind of reflect a little bit on how far this defense has come too. I mean, in the offseason, we thought Florida State has to win two facets of the game. Maybe it would be offense and special teams, and maybe you'd get enough stops on defense to win shootouts, right?
Yep.
How far has this defense come? I mean, legitimately, even going back to 2021 Jacksonville State, when everybody was in an uproar over where this defense was, to where it grew in 22, where it grew in 23, building depth on the defensive line. Again, this kind of championship depth that Mike Norvell has talked about is showing in these big situations where guys are fresh to be able to make these plays. And you guys also pointed out Alex Mastromano falling on that ball, taking the sack. That could have been a huge turnaround if he gets popped, fumbles. If it becomes a touchdown, who knows where you get from a momentum standpoint. But there was just a lot of little plays that they didn't look good, but in the end, they kept Florida State going in the right direction.
Yeah, Nick?
Yeah, I think along the same lines, just the same thing that Bob says about the defense, just how far it's come over not only this season, but the last few years. Just in general, the culture of Florida State to be able to win that type of game. Third string quarterback, the weight of the world is on this team's shoulders, so to speak. To be able to go, probably knowing that Tate wasn't going to play, to go and win that game, that is a game that only this iteration of Florida State would be able to win. This is not a game that last year's team would probably win, or even a couple of years before. That this would be a game that previous iterations of Florida State would completely fold and crumble under the pressure, and they didn't. And it's the hallmark of a confident, mature, weathered football team that, as Bob alluded to, this is exactly why, and we kind of mentioned this coming into the week earlier, this is why Florida State is rotating bodies. It's using its depth to be able to be fresh for these types of games. And I was just so incredibly impressed with the poise and maturity of this football team. Especially, I mean, Brock didn't play his best game, but he's a true freshman. He did what he needed to in order to win. And hell, the Louisville kid Plummer had about 32 more starts than Brock did, and he arguably looked worse than Brock did.
I think it was 37 more starts. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was a lot. So, we'll get into whether Florida State is deserving of their final spot later in the show. But I was just super impressed, watching that there with you guys. how far the maturity and culture of this football team has really come. You want an earmarked game to pinpoint what this current Florida State culture means under Mike Norvell. That's the type of win that you bookmark.
Yeah, and listen, and we've talked about a little bit about this before. I remember towards the end of the preseason when Adam Fuller made the statement that he thought this team could be defensively as good as any team in the country, and I think we all kind of walked away. All right, well, positive thoughts. That helps going into the season. You open up with LSU, want to have confidence in you want your defense to have confidence, thinking that the coaches believe in them. And I think we all had questions about linebackers, which turned out to be much better this season than we thought they would. Then they had some issues early on in coverage, and I think you had Fintrell Cypress, who was new in the system. His play got better from a responsibility standpoint. We didn't see as many blown coverages the deeper they got into the season. And I was talking to a former Florida State coach before the game last night. He goes, listen, I think this is the kind of defense that can win a ACC championship. They're that good. So my question to you guys is, all right, depending on who's in, the offenses that Florida State could face could vary, right? It could be Michigan, it could be Alabama, it could be Washington, it could be Texas, it could be any of those teams. Is this the kind of – do you guys believe that this is the kind of team, the defense, that could carry FSU in the playoffs past the semifinal? Depending on who they get matched up with. Fish, I'll start with you.
I don't think so. And I don't want to – it's just offensively at the end of the day, no matter how good a defense is going to be, they're not going to – you play a Washington, maybe you keep them under 28, you keep them around 28, 25, 28. Do you think Florida State in this offense can score that? That's the problem, is you're going to ask a lot of this defense to keep these teams under their averages, way under their averages, for you to be in the game, let alone beat them. And I just think that these teams, Michigan's got a defense that's just as good as Florida State. Offensively, I just think they're very methodical. They don't make mistakes. And I just think the dam would break at some point if you can't put points on the score. They'd have to get defensive touchdowns. They'd have to get special teams touchdowns. This offense, as it is right here and now, I don't think it could score more than like 17 to 20. That's a lot to ask them to keep those other teams under 20 points. Is it possible? Yeah, but I think it's more unlikely.
All right. Jerry, what do you think? I mean, you love defensive football. What do you think about Florida State's defense being able to, go against some of the better offenses in the country and give FSU a legitimate chance at winning?
I said it to you before the show. I like Florida State's chances against Michigan. I don't think they've faced a defense that is got the speed and capability of Florida State. And I think they could hold Michigan underneath their offensive total. Now the question is, how many points can Florida State score? And you might have to depend on a defensive score, or being put in really good position in that game in order to score enough points to beat them. But you do get Tate Rodemaker back. You'll have a month with him to get prepared. And listen, I feel pretty good that Florida State can hold Michigan to 17.
Yeah, I could see an 18-17, 12-9, 9-6 game against Michigan. What about you, Bob?
Yeah, I do tend to lean toward what Fish is saying. Let me be just, if I'm making an argument for Florida State in this standpoint, you get rested players, okay? You get Darrell Jackson out there on the field for the first time this year. That can change some things.
Darrell Jackson and Braden Fisk would be scary.
It would be scary, right? What happens in the scenario where you force a couple of takeaways, and that could very well happen. Yeah, I think Florida State, if you were ranking the, let's say, efficiency of the four remaining teams in the playoffs just based on their offense, what is their offensive efficiency? You'd probably say, well, Florida State's fourth and maybe a distant fourth. But when you factor in the potential of a Keon Coleman return to set up a shorter field, or a Mastromano who flips the field, sets up the opposing offense on a longer field, the potential of a defensive takeaway, there is a formula, there's a roadmap to where you can be very competitive. Can you win? A lot of things have to go your way.
Nick?
I just think it's very matchup dependent. If you're looking at a Michigan that obviously loves to run the football, and as Bob said, you get Darrell Jackson back with the level that Peyton, Fisk, and Verse are playing at, they're playing like the best defensive line in the country right now. But if you're getting a matchup against somebody like Washington that has a Michael Penix Jr., and we watched him carve up the Oregon defense, which is a pretty decent defense.
Yeah.
To say the least. I guess the one knock that you can say that kind of, just to play devil's advocate here, the bad guy on the shoulder, is that Florida State still, even in the last 3 to 4 weeks, has not played a good quarterback. And there is we can talk all we want about how much this defense has improved, and it has improved, but you have to also acknowledge with that the level of quarterback play that has come the past few weeks. Now, was Plummer just that bad last night, or was it Florida State's defense making him look that bad? That's where you can probably go and take a look at the film. And I haven't watched too much of Louisville throughout the rest of the season. But that there's an argument to be made for either case there. So as it pertains to the playoff, if you're getting a Michigan that loves to run the football, I know the stat on Florida State's rush defense isn't that fantastic, but the eye test suggests that they are playing at an elite level up front in the box. But if you get a Washington team with a good quarterback that can really throw the ball and carve up the defense, especially up the middle, that's where it kind of becomes a huge question mark as to whether or not this defense can lead Florida State through a semifinal.
Yeah, listen, to your question about what was worse last night, Plummer, his performance and ability, or FSU's defense. I give full credit to FSU's defense. Louisville had a very good offense coming into this game. We talked a little bit about Jeff Brom last night. I've followed Jeff Brom's career for a long time. He is one of the best play callers in college football. His quarterbacks are usually very effective. What they did to that team, I mean, that team could not do anything last night. 188 total yards. I would almost guarantee you it was the only time Louisville finished below 300 yards all season. I've not gone back and done that.
Well, they are averaging 420.
Yeah. And you turned a 68% passer, a 66% passer, 78% passer with adjusted completion percentage by PFF, I mean, factoring in drops. He turned him into a 38% passer last night.
Listen, you could go back and look at Brom's career even as an OC. They've never been dominated like that.
Nope.
Never. And he was at Purdue where he had to rebuild that program. He rebuilt Louisville this year. They've never been dominant. Because I know one of my good friends wanted Brom to possibly be the guy that replaced Taggart. And I got to tell you, I followed his career. That was pure. He's never been stuff like that. Trust me.
Right.
I guarantee you he'll tell you that. They've never been dominated like that.
Well, there you go. Again, I still lean on the point of, well, it depends on who you see in the playoff. But I mean, if the Florida State defense was really doing that to a scheme and an offensive play caller like that, then you got to give them flowers.
I think the one thing about Michigan, and I think everybody overlooks this. They just think it's the typical Michigan, or they play the results. They only won 26-0. Michigan, when they had to play Ohio State, or they played Penn State, they ran 30-something straight times. And everybody in the stadium knew they couldn't do it. That's a great football team when you can run that many times and they can't stop you. And what they did to Ohio State with 8 minutes left, they basically sucked oxygen. Michigan doesn't turn the ball over. They've got the best. McCarthy would be the best quarterback they faced. And they've got a very good O-line. And you're asking a team, and I'm not saying Florida State can't beat them. Anything's possible when you get this far, because Florida State, I think, is a great team. I think people overlook the fact that they are a team. They're not individuals. They are a great team, and they've got great pieces on that team. You're asking a lot of a team that the last 2 weeks offensively has literally been I don't want to say awful, but it's been close to it. You're asking that a lot of that defense to hold a very good team that eventually is going to break the dam in a game. Listen, last night, all it took was one good drive, and Florida State could have lost that game. It puts so much pressure on you. And we know as in the playoffs are a lot different. When one thing goes wrong, we've seen it in Super Bowls or playoffs, that thing could go sideways real quick. And this team isn't built to come back from more than 7 points. Right now, it's the way it is 10 points.
Well, all right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. It is about the offense, right? I mean, that's where it's about Jordan Travis not being healthy. It's about what they've done the last 2 weeks on offense. And how do you guys think? How big a factor do you think that plays with the committee's thought process? We're about what?
Let me lead this off. Let me lead this off by saying, if Florida State, all of us, except maybe me, are offensive oriented. The world of college football is offensive oriented. I promise you, the people on that committee are offensive oriented. But I would advocate that if Florida State's offense the last 2 weeks played as good as this defense did, and our defense played as bad,
they would get in.
I mean, we'd be Washington. And everybody would go, great. Man, we're great.
Washington's defense isn't that bad. Like, Jerry, you keep saying that Washington's defense is bad. Their defense, I know what the stats say, but I've watched them all year. Their defense gets stops when they need to. That's how college football is now. You get stops. You don't see
36 fish on the stop rate. On the stop rate.
I understand, but when they needed stops against Oregon, they got stops. And Oregon's better offensively than any team FSU's seen this year. They get stops. And that's the thing. When LSU won the national title with Joe Burrow, their defense was exactly how Washington was. It was a very average defense. They just blew teams out. And I'm telling you, they're nowhere near one of the worst defenses. They get stops against Arizona. They got a pick six. They do enough in games to stop teams. When they played Oregon State had the ball last, and they stopped Oregon State to win the game. Their defense won the game. This defense, plus two, their starting two safeties have not played most of the year. They played in the Oregon game, and you saw how much better their defense was. I think you're underrating this team. I really do.
I am, I'm sure, because I don't have any respect for the tackling in the Pac-12. I have to turn it off, Fish. I can't watch it.
That's great. I'm telling you, you don't want to play them. That's the one team in this.
Oh, no, I don't, because of their offense.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying to you is that they're going to get in, and everybody's excited about them because their offense is great.
Yeah, because Michael Penix looks like a damn all-pro playing quarterback, and they're fun to watch offensively.
You can Jared Verse and Fisk and all these guys, Ball and Dent played his ass off.
I said it was the best performance I've ever seen. I think their defense played unreal last night, but you're expecting them to
change the eye test, is what I'm saying.
I'm saying, though, you're expecting them to play to that level against way better offenses, and then an offense that hasn't played well the last 2 weeks. We're talking about if they score 17 points against Michigan, they can win. So you're basically telling me right then and there, you don't think this team could score more than 17 points, against a good team. It's just, you got to be realistic. I mean, listen, FSU should be in. I said that. I've been on them since LSU game. I think they're one of the top teams in college football. But offensively, this team's going to have a hard time scoring points. And if they turn it over, I mean, there could have easily been 2 or 3 picks from Glenn last night, and we're having a different discussion today.
Hey, Fish, you talked about Michigan not turning the ball over. They're tied with Florida State with 5 turnovers this year.
Yeah, they don't turn it over.
We don't turn it over either.
No, I know, but they're so controlled. They suck. Listen, they're so good at what they do that you fall asleep, but they're great at what they do. They're a power run team. They're not flashy, but they're very productive at what they do. They're efficient.
And this is what makes the playoffs great, because we're going to get to see Washington against
I think you're going to see them against FSU in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah,
We're
we'll
gonna
see.
talk about that too.
Michigan's got a great defense, so maybe they'll put the two of them in the Rose Bowl. Who knows?
Well, listen, I kind of feel like we're getting ready to go into our Fraser Crane I'm listening part because everybody's going to need some therapy today at some point.
Yeah.
So, somewhere in America, there's going to be a lot of therapy going on. And listen, just for the day, I actually came outfitted with my widespread panic T-shirt on because there's widespread panic everywhere. I've been waking up to messages all night about the damn playoff, man. I just can't wait for them to decide. But listen, I think that you got to give Florida State some credit for the fact that they have won with two different quarterbacks the last 2 weeks. Now, I don't know if that's enough to get them over the finish line because I do think that, listen, they said when they started the College Football Playoff Committee or the process, 10 years ago, whenever it was, that they were going to consider who was available on every roster. And I heard Dan Orlovsky said this is not a tight end, this is not a defensive end, this is a quarterback that Florida State is missing. I think that is the impediment for Florida State getting in. Now, I have them at number 4, and we're fixing to release our Osceola poll right before our Osceola rankings right before we start here. But I think that is the thing that works against them is there's no Jordan Travis and the fact that the offense has not produced at a eye test rate the last 2 games. They've played well enough to win. They've protected the football, which Jerry's talked about. We've talked about all season. As we talked about, even Alex Mastromanno protected the football last night. So they've done a great job of that. So it is going to be very interesting. I think this is going to be a fascinating next 15 to 20 minutes, and it's probably going to be a more fascinating afternoon because we all love college football, right? And I think we all want to see a good playoff. So I think there's every argument. There are probably 7 teams that are in this discussion. I think Ohio State's out of it for whatever reason. I think they're just as deserving as any other one-loss team to be in the debate. I think they'll end up at 7. But as you start to listen to these arguments, you can make compelling arguments for just about all the top 6 teams outside of Ohio State, I think. Obviously, you can make a case for Florida State. Michigan and Washington, I think, are obviously locks. So I think really the argument is who's got the strongest arguments, 2 arguments, out of Alabama, Florida State, and Texas. So I'd ask you guys, do you think Florida State's argument is as strong as Alabama and Texas?
Well, I mean, you got to think about – here's what I always go back to. It's like, is the game being played next week or tomorrow? No. It's being played in a couple weeks from now. What does Florida State's team look like 4 weeks from now? You get Tate Rodemaker back. You get, a couple of guys on that team more healthy. And then you kind of see where you're at. But if this game is being played tomorrow, then obviously I think you could take a look at everything and say, well, Florida State's offense last night looked rancid with a true freshman quarterback, as you would expect it to be with a true freshman quarterback, right? But the argument for Florida State really is like, okay, 4 weeks down the road, what does this team look like? You have Rodemaker likely coming back. You have Darrell Jackson joining the defensive line. You have a healthier team with 4 weeks to prepare for either Washington or Texas or Michigan or whoever, right? Or Alabama or whoever. The question then becomes, well, is Tate Rodemaker's performance in the swamp a product of the swamp, or is that also what Florida State's offense looks like with Rodemaker at the helm? So you kind of just have this multiple double-edged sword in terms of Florida State's claim to a semifinal spot.
They're better with Tate than they are with Glenn.
That's absolutely.
Honestly, Tate, the 4 years in the system, being there, and I thought he looked rattled last week. I thought he looks kind of scared. But at the end of the day, I saw enough of Glenn yesterday. He's not ready. He's just not ready to play in these moments. I don't think you should put him in that type of situation unless you have to, like yesterday. But Tate's the better option.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that. Bob, you think Florida State's got just as compelling an argument as Texas and Alabama, or a better argument?
Yeah, I think conference championships have to matter in this argument. I've always said it's stupid that we have 4 spots and we have 5 power conferences. It should have always been 6 or 8. You could have done 6 with first round buys or something. You could have made that work so that every Power 5 conference champion has a seat at the table. The other argument I might make, if Jordan Travis is not injured and the scores are the exact same, I don't think we're having this discussion today. I think Florida State's definitely in. I think this discussion has popped up in part because Jordan Travis is not a Heisman finalist, and Jordan Travis is not the quarterback, and people are starting to question, what does Florida State look like with Tate Rodemaker against these potential college football playoff schools? I think that's the wrong way to look at it. It's about the resume through the regular season. It's about the resume of winning a conference championship game. I hope the committee sees it that way, but I do think, as much as they did say a couple weeks ago, Jordan Travis's injury had no bearing on their discussions, let me tell you, it's discussed.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. I think that's good. I think, as I said, I think that is the biggest obstacle in Florida State's way right now is, will they give Florida State credit for being 13-0 and winning every game, as opposed to Jordan Travis not being able to play and affecting what the offense has done the last 2 games. Jerry, anything to add to that?
Only that I think Texas has has an advantage over Alabama, having beaten them. But, who knows, right? They had a bad loss too.
Yeah, I can't remember. Who did they lose to? Oklahoma?
They lost to Oklahoma on the final drive of the game. So it's like, and Oklahoma's 10-2. So it's not a terrible loss. I mean, Oklahoma's still it's not like they were 8-4. Texas, by the end of the season, I think still, I've watched these teams. I don't know. Maybe you guys watch different football than I do. I think Texas is better than what I saw from Georgia and Alabama yesterday. I think Texas is the most overrated program in the country. I don't want to give them credit, but they're a very good football team. What I watched yesterday, listen, you're supposed to beat teams like that if you're a national championship or a playoff team. Oh, well, they didn't play anybody. Well, they beat that team how they were supposed to. They dominated them from beginning to end, and they looked really good on both sides of the football.
Well, they did look good, and they did dominate. I watched almost all of that game. They were the best team from the start of that game to the finish. It was not even close. I'm just not sure that I agree that win is more impressive than Alabama's win over number 1 ranked Georgia. And I think that's why I would have Alabama in front of Texas.
The only thing I'm going to say about that, Pat, and I'm not trying to knock Georgia. First off, Georgia, they're a great team, great program. They didn't really play a whole lot of good teams this year, being in the East side. And that wasn't the same Georgia. Amarius Mims didn't play. You want to talk about a team that took a lot of losses from injuries. Amarius Mims didn't play. Bowers was 50%. McConkey was 50%. Their third best receiver was out. That Georgia team wasn't the same team we've seen all year. So if we're going to take injuries into account, Alabama beat a team that was severely limited offensively and wasn't the same team we've seen the last 2 or 3 years.
Fair enough. Anybody else want to talk Alabama, Texas?
Well, I mean, I think Fish makes a pretty good point there, but you got to think about the SEC goggles that are going to be viewed on everything.
I didn't know that was a prerequisite that if you're in the SEC, you're automatically in the playoffs. Like if that's
I know. I'm being
I know, but if that's one of the criteria, they should just say that. Hey, you're in the SEC, you win the conference, you're automatically in if you go 6-6.
Well, if they get in, I think that's what they will be saying.
I guess Texas is winning at Alabama, where they dominate. Shouldn't have any impact on their decision making.
It will.
No, I mean, like
it
that
will.
said.
I mean, it will have some. I mean, listen, these guys are having these same conversations, probably not being as nice to each other as we are.
I would think Texas is in.
I think Texas is in too.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's release our rankings because they've already started the show, and so we took all 7 of us from the Osceola, compiled our individual top 5, our top 6 into the Osceola committee's playoff rankings. And here's what we came up with: we have Michigan number 1 by 1 point over Washington. Then we had Florida State 3, Texas 4, Alabama 5, Georgia 6, and there was definitive difference between Florida State, Texas, and Alabama as 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6. I mean, I'm sorry, 3, 4, and 5. Florida State on our poll had plenty of wiggle room in front of those teams. So we would have Michigan and Texas in the wouldn't be the Rose Bowl, I'm sure, Sugar Bowl, and we'd have Washington and Florida State in the Rose Bowl. So that's where we landed on it. Guys, how do you guys feel about our top four? Where do you agree and disagree?
This was exactly my ballot, so I totally agree with this. I just think there is a differentiation, again, between the unbeatens and the conference champions and those that have at least one loss.
All right. Jerry?
I'm good with it. I think I was right on that.
Fish?
Yeah, I basically the undefeateds are in, and I think Texas's win over Alabama is the difference. I think those are the 4 teams in.
All right. Nick?
I mean, I had Florida State at 4, and I had Texas jumping them to number 3 in my poll. Because if you're going to, I feel like if you're going to slight Florida State's performance in any way, you would have Texas jump them. But I feel like that's probably what we all landed on at the end of the day. I think is probably what it's going to end up being. But if we want to be the negative Nancy in the glass half empty, you could say, well, maybe you could see something like somebody like a Texas jumping Florida State based on the performances from yesterday.
Well, Chris Holder just brought up a great point. Maybe they will grandfather Texas into the SEC before the playoff starts, and we will have an SEC.
Yeah. I thought about that this morning.
Great job. All right, so I had Washington 1, Michigan 2, Alabama 3, and Florida State 4. So I think the SEC champion deserves to be in.
You have Washington 1?
Yep.
So obviously you think they're pretty good.
I've had them 1 or 2 every week we've done this poll.
Yeah.
I've never wavered on my love for the purple power that is the Washington Huskies. I think I'm with you, Fish, on the Huskies. I think they can get it done. I think listen, I thought Oregon might have been as good as anybody in America going into that championship game on Friday night. And I think now Washington might have, as far as, I mean, I know they beat the same team twice, but I think Oregon was better in the second game than they were the first game, and they were pretty damn good in the first game. So, I've got Washington 1. I think especially the way Michigan did not look. I mean, obviously they shut out Iowa, but I think that was the expectation all along, right? I mean, nobody thought Iowa was going to score more than 6 points. They kind of, the game was all at the same time, so I can't sit here and say I paid total attention to all right, boys, we got some breaking news on something else. Houston has hired Tulane head coach Willie Fritz, so we know that's probably going to put one of Florida State's assistants in the pool for that job. We'll talk about that later.
Oh, boy.
That is breaking news. Alex Atkins was the offensive coordinator for Willie Fritz before he came to Florida State, so that'll be interesting. But we'll talk. I just want to break that news because it will be a talking point over the next couple of days. But yeah, listen, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about before I went to Alex Atkins?
You can't multitask. You're just talking about.
Hey,
you were just talking about how you can't multitask.
I am putting up graphics. I'm interacting with viewers. I'm talking to you guys. I mean, there's a lot going on over here in Colar.
Anyway, you were talking about how you weren't able to pay as much attention to the Big Ten.
I just wasn't. From what little I did see, we had a bank of televisions in front of us, but obviously,
yes, we did.
Our focus was Florida State and some soccer game that they had on. But anyway, I just didn't think Michigan looked dominant enough. Jerry and I talked about this before we came. After watching Michigan, I think Florida State can play with Michigan in a semifinal or final game.
One thing to remember, though, they just played an emotional game against their main rival, Ohio State, and you're playing an Iowa team that's sleepy. It's not the easiest to get up for, knowing that you're a 22-point favorite, and they still covered. Like I said, people play the results. That's a very good Michigan team.
Oh, I'm not saying they're not very good. I'm just saying that I thought going in that game was going to be like 42-3, and they were just going to run through them whatever. What's the thing about shit through a goose. Yeah, I thought it'd be one of those. I thought it'd be one of those type of games. I did not think it would be close. I didn't think. Well, listen, when it was 13-0, the game was probably over. But I just thought they would manhandle them, and they may have. I'd have to go back.
They played very vanilla. Listen, I don't want to be defending Michigan like they're the best team of all time, but they dominated that football game. Iowa didn't get past midfield. They basically did whatever they wanted. They knew once they got to 13, the game was over.
You haven't been sending Jim Harbaugh signals, have you?
Listen, he's a great coach. He's a little bit of a wackadoo, but man, he's a great coach.
He's very entertaining.
I mean, you sleep at players' recruits' houses to land them. I mean, hey, man, everything is on the table at that point. So
you should always do yourself a favor and watch Jim Harbaugh's weekly press conferences on Monday or Tuesday. Whenever they are fascinating. His mind, he's the poor man's Mike Leach when it comes to press conference. He's not quite as entertaining, but he has some bizarre thoughts that come across his mind. I mean, he actually is fun to listen to. Like, I've always been disappointed that Steve Spurrier left college football because his post-game and Monday press conferences were the best thing around. I don't think Mike Leach was the next best thing we had when it comes to press conferences by head coaches. And now I think we got to give the title to Jim Harbaugh because I really don't know anybody that I just cannot wait to listen to on post game or Mondays and Tuesdays like Harbaugh. I mean, just because, as you said, he has a different version of the world than most of us.
What, Billy's not up there with him?
No, Billy Napier is not up there. And listen, I like Billy Napier, but they should limit him to. They should preload the questions for him in his press conferences. And he should be only allowed 10 minutes in front of the microphone. And
Get him read them off the teleprompter.
Yes, something like that. He does need the teleprompter. But yeah, listen, I think it's going to be. We're getting closer. They keep on. They've got 4 people up. They got somebody in Tallahassee. So anyway. I cannot wait for. I thought they might be already a little bit further along into this.
Oh no, they're going to drag this thing out a little bit because you don't usually have, and I doubt you'll ever have again, where you even have 3 teams undefeated at the same time, and then you have so many good 1-loss teams that's a good thing about the whole thing expanding is that you won't have these issues anymore. Now you'll probably have some 3 and 4 loss teams going, well, why weren't we the 12th seed? But it is.
I think where you'll have the debates next year is the first 4 teams get a bye.
Yeah.
And the 5 will be bitching about being 5 and not having home field advantage, a bye and home field advantage. So,
well, I know one thing. I know out of the way this thing could work out, the team I do want to see Florida State draw. I would like to see them draw Michigan over anybody else. If they're in the semifinal, obviously they're in top 4. I hope that it works out that they're either 2-3 or 1-4, because that's who I like. I think that's the best chance they have of making it past the semifinal is to face Michigan. I know that sounds crazy to say, but I do like their chances better against them than I do Washington, Texas, or Alabama. What do you guys think?
I disagree. I think I would, out of all of them, I think I would probably have them play Texas. I know Texas looked really dominant, but I just think that as weird as it is, because from the entire country's perspective, looking at Michigan, it's like, oh, sign stealing, only beat Michigan or only beat Ohio State. But from the optics coming from the Michigan side of things, is that's a determined chip on the shoulder football team that loves to run the football and is really talented. And I know on paper we could take a look at that and say, oh, well, maybe Florida State has a chance, but on the side of it that's not on the football field, I think Michigan is playing with a chip on the shoulder, and I think Texas has shown the capability throughout the season to kind of sleepwalk in some situations. And the other thing is that Michigan has been in the semifinal. What is it? 2 years in a row now. Now, granted, they haven't won the semifinal, but they are probably the most next to somebody like a Georgia, which Georgia may not get in now. They probably won't get in. Michigan is the most experienced team that will be in these playoffs. So I feel like if Florida State were able to draw a Texas that, didn't really get challenged in their championship game, is stepping into this platform for the first time, similar to how Florida State would be, I think that would be the most optimal draw.
Yeah, I don't want any part of Texas' defensive line.
But Texas is still Texas. They could always, the history of that school is to let their fans and everybody around them down. So I agree with you, Nick. If I'm gonna draw somebody, I want Texas. I think FSU is a tougher football team, and if I'm gonna take one, it would be them.
All right, Bob, Jerry, you got any thoughts on who you'd like to see them play in the semifinal if they make it?
I just want to see them in the top 4.
Yeah, let's get there first.
Well, we're talking about it because they haven't announced the teams.
I know.
If number 4 shows somebody else other than FSU, I think you guys will get a little nervous.
Oh, I think they're going to be. I don't think they're
Very
going to be.
nervous.
I don't think they're going to be 3. I think if they're in, they're 4. Because of the question about the offense. I think that's going to make them the lowest seed of the playoff teams if they get in.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here watching 93 from Texas score a touchdown, man. Those cats on that defensive line can play. I respect y'all's opinion, but God, I would not want to play those guys. Not the first game.
I think the thing that's interesting about this particular playoff in general is that I think every single one of us could sit here and make an argument as to why, man, Florida State I would not want to see Florida State playing that team. I think there's an argument to be made for every single team that would be in this playoff.
Well, I agree.
So I mean, it's one of those. In a weird way, it's the best time for this CFP scenario to play out, but also the worst time for the CFP.
Have you been reading A Tale of Two Cities? It was the best of time. It was the worst of times.
Oh, I haven't read that book since I was in high school, but yeah,
I've read the first paragraph.
This is the most reading you've done in 10 years.
When's this thing supposed to be announced?
I probably haven't read in 10 years, to be honest with you. Everything I need to know is on YouTube or Twitter. Yeah. Why do I need to read anything anymore? Yeah. All right. So, hey, is there any chance, guys, that Georgia and Alabama both make it?
No. I would be sending a federal investigator to Sankey's house. If that happened, to be honest with you.
That would be better than what I thought you were going to send to his house.
No. I don't have access to those.
Remember, guys, this is a committee.
Yep.
Like Coach Bowden said, the giraffe was Bobby's, committee decision. Created the giraffe.
Yep.
No good decisions come out of committee.
We have talked about this, though. We have said there are 3 coaches on this committee, and there's 3 coaches there for a reason. It's Jim Grobe, it's Joe Taylor, it's Chris Alt. Yeah. Some guys who understand, I think, respect Florida State and ACC football. Obviously, Grobe being at Wake Forest for a long time. Joe Taylor coached at FAMU. I think there is an understanding. There will not be a cheapening of the ACC in the discussion. I do think there might be a cheapening in what does Florida State look like without Jordan Travis. But at the end of the day, I think the coaches will be the voices of reason and will say teams that are conference champions, that have not lost a game, have a higher weight in the discussion.
Yeah, I think those 3 guys will definitively. And I don't know if did they release each committee member's individual votes?
I don't think so.
I think they should. I think they should.
I think there's 14 people on that committee, only 3 coaches.
Yeah, I think it's 13 and 3. Yep, I think that's right. Yeah.
I think there's some former players, though, aren't there?
I believe so. I believe that's correct. I don't know who all is on it.
1 or 2.
Yep. So I think that bodes well for Florida State. So I think it comes down to one of those other 10 guys going to do.
But remember, everybody last year thought there was no way that Alabama would get left out and TCU wouldn't get in, and TCU got in. So I have faith that these guys will do their
valid point. What happened to TCU last year in the championship game? Does that factor into how the committee does that factor in at all?
They won a game, so
I know. I'm just asking. I knew they made it to the final. Yeah, and Yeah,
I mean, if this committee is as good as at their jobs as they want to think they are, last year doesn't. It may give confidence to the fans and everybody hoping to make it into a playoff spot. But if they're taking anything from last year into consideration and how they grade this, I
Oh
don't.
man, you guys are typical Florida State people. Just you believe the world, always the negative side's going to happen, man. Have some faith. Have some faith, man.
Well, I mean, can you blame me? I enrolled in 2015, and since then, Fish, it's been nothing but downhill. I got to climb my way out.
You poor soul. You had to endure the Willie years, and
Oh my God.
As an impressionable youth, that will linger for you forever. The rest of us remember the 90s.
Hey, I brought it up, and Jerry will remember. My first experience with FSU was, I believe, the 79 and 80 Orange Bowl, and then playing Oklahoma. And I think one of the years FSU was undefeated and had a shot at the national title. So that they've had a lot of good football while I've been alive, and the Willie years, honestly, most teams have like 3 or 4 of those in the same time frame that I've been alive. So, I mean, I don't think there's been a lot more positive with Florida State football than negative.
I think one of my first games at FSU as a student, Florida State was playing Virginia Tech.
With leather helmets?
Florida State had Gary Huff was the starting quarterback for FSU, and Don Strock was the quarterback for. They were ranked number
Don
one.
Don Strock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Famous Miami Dolphin.
They were ranked number 1 and number 2 in the nation in passing. That was my first game in Bill Campbell Stadium as a student.
Hey, Jerry,
hold on now. The next year or two, within a couple of years of that, I think.
All right, here we go. Michigan, number 1.
Enough about the 1920s.
You're ahead of me.
Michigan, number 1. Well, something.
We went 0-11 and 1-10 my junior and senior year.
Jerry, you know who the coach was at FIU before Mario, right? Don Strock. He was terrible. The worst coach I've ever met.
You know who backed up Don Strock at Virginia Tech, don't you? Bruce Arians.
Oh, my.
Oh.
There's a trivia. I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure it's who backed up. Either coached him or backed him up. I think I have to go back and look at it, but he has a Virginia Tech record. I'm pretty sure he played at Virginia Tech. I think he's a Hokie.
So we went from really good football at Florida State to the outhouse with and the guy who led it.
Number 2 is Washington.
All right.
All right. Now,
all right.
We're getting closer now. They're going to sit here and opine about them for about 2 minutes.
They're going to commercial right now.
They cannot go to commercial in the middle of the top 6.
3-minute media timeout, real quick.
Yeah.
3.5 minutes. Yeah.
Guy with the red hat.
Yep.
Somebody's going to call a timeout.
Get the stick with the timer, the countdown timer.
At least they do that. I mean, if they're going to make me sit through that ridiculous amount of commercials, at least I know how much time I have to go get a glass of water, a bottle of water in the press box. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Or if I want to run up to the roof and watch the game from the roof and know how much time to get back.
I'm glad that you got to discover that, because I cannot believe you've been here as long as you did and you didn't know that you can go up there.
Listen, if I had access to my computer up there, y'all would never see me in the press box. I would watch the entire game from the top.
I'll bet we can make that happen.
Texas is
Let's
in.
Let's do it.
Texas is in.
Texas at 3. Oh, Lord, boys, now I am nervous.
Okay.
Texas is 3. How in the world?
Well, that's what I figured. I'm like, well, if you're gonna slight Florida State but keep them in, you'd have them get jumped by somebody. So, if Florida State is not at 4 here, then oh boy.
Yeah, I listen. I thought they were going to be 4 all along, so I thought they were going to get jumped by Texas or Alabama. So that does not surprise me at all.
Rematch of the playoff bowl game.
All right, boys, throw it up there. You've set that 4 box empty long enough. Oh shit! Then they go through a split screen: Alabama, Georgia, and Florida State.
They could do like Price is Right, or
Georgia shouldn't even be in the conversation.
Well, it's going to be interesting. They really are playing this thing out. Maybe they haven't quite decided yet.
They're going to send it in like the NFL draft. You got to send in a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Or
Alabama
ballot.
4-1 versus top 25. FSU 3-0. Georgia 3-1. Strength of schedule: Alabama 5, Georgia 37th, FSU 53rd.
Yeah, the
55th,
strength of schedule. Strength of schedule hurts.
But again, you can't control your strength of schedule. You can win the games.
Georgia. No, Georgia 6. Georgia 6. Sorry.
Oh, so now they're going backwards.
Yes, they're trying. Yeah, so
For the love of God.
my heart about sank when I saw Georgia. I was like, no, there's no way.
They're going to crown the runner-up next.
Now they should. Yeah, well, they should just put 4 and 5 up at the same time. All right. Well, Georgia dropped 5 spots. That sounds about right.
Georgia fans aren't happy about that.
Oh, Alabama got it. Florida State is out of the playoff. Alabama is the 4th ranked team in the playoff. So you have Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama.
What a travesty.
So Jordan Travis's injury has impacted this vote clearly, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt.
And I want to say it first. Florida State is going to go to a near 6 game. If they win, I believe Michael Alford and Mike Norvell will push to have a national championship banner somewhere on campus at Doak Campbell Stadium in the IPF. They will use this as a huge motivator. We will see probably very few opt-outs, I believe. That's just my opinion. I think they'll rally the troops to try and win this and call this a national championship.
Listen, if this doesn't wake up the people at Florida State, they need to get out of the ACC, then nothing will. This is a travesty. I think it's a joke of college football that they did this to Florida State. And if nobody else wants to say it, I will. It's straight BS.
Well, I would have had them in at 4. I would have taken Texas or Alabama at 3. I thought the SEC champion would get in. I mean, you could see that coming from a mile away. Listen, Greg Sankey's been on. He's had his little press road thing all week, and he's doing his job, right? I mean, that's what he's paid to do. He's the commissioner of the SEC. But yeah, I'm with you, Fish. I thought they should have. I thought they should have given this team a chance to play for the national championship, given the fact that this defense had played so overwhelmingly good the last 2 weeks, carried this team. But I agree with Bob. I think at the end of the day, what we talked about early in the show, I think Jordan Travis not playing and the offense not being anywhere near what it looked like prior to his injury. I think at the end of the day, I think whether Boo Kerrigan or the committee talks about it, and
you just said that the regular season and these games don't matter. That's what you just said. That winning your conference, that basically you change the rules once again. It's just ridiculous. I don't know, man. I think it's ridiculous, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, again, if you want to go to the conference championships, I mean, Florida State still won the conference championship. It's not that they lost it and they're now out of the top 4, right? So, right, I mean, it's we have been saying, I don't know if it's been openly said on this show, but it's definitely been said in the inner circle to the kind of the talks about, well, there is a case to be made like this may be the situation in which for the first time ever a 13-0 conference championship gets left out. And now that we're here, it's weird. It's contradictory because as much as the committee wants to say, well, Jordan Travis's injury didn't affect – why does Jordan Travis's injury now affect it, whereas it didn't a couple of weeks ago, right? Like I can understand why it does, but you still have to ask the question as to why that is now coming into play. And this may sound as like really homerish because it does come from that place. But I mean, if Florida State was able to go into the swamp with a backup quarterback and win and shut down a good Louisville team with one of the most dominant defensive performances that anybody has that I've seen personally, and I'm sure that you guys can chime in and say that was one of the most dominant performances that you've seen with a third string quarterback again, my whole point earlier, this game is not played tomorrow. It's played 4 weeks from now. You know, if the game was played tomorrow, then maybe you can make the argument and say, yeah, I can understand why Florida State got left out. But
well, I can tell you what their argument is going to be. It's going to be body of work after 13 games and watching Florida State without its starting quarterback struggle offensively. I mean, yeah, you ask. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Alabama struggled against a USF team. They struggled to beat an Auburn team at home that lost to New Mexico State. Like,
well,
come
Fish,
on.
not everybody just walks into Raymond James Stadium and comes out with a win.
Yeah, I know.
Those Bulls can be
Like I
tough.
said,
Those
these
Bulls can
are
be tough.
people that I truly don't believe watch the games and they play the results, and that's what they look at. And it's a travesty, I think.
Well,
And
you
I know.
what?
Sorry,
You feel for the kids in that building, those coaches in that building right now, because that's got to be very deflating. I'm sure they were having they're having a watch party or just got through watching this. I can only imagine, having been a part of 10 college football teams over the course of my career. We got left out of a bowl at South Carolina one year when we were very deserving. We got left out of a bowl one year at South Florida when we were very deserving. So, and this is the same, because it wasn't a playoff, but I do have a appreciation for what those guys are going through. I can only imagine the sinking feeling in their all. I mean, that's just got to be gut wrenching over there at the Moore Center right now. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Hey, sorry, I was muted, but we have a statement from Michael Alford. It's coming across on email. And it begins, it is a very long statement. I won't read as a full, but the consequences of giving into a narrative of the moment are destructive, far-reaching, and permanent, not just for Florida State, but college football as a whole. We'll put the full statement up on the site, but it was a prepared statement for this moment. Florida State clearly was ready to respond.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a little bit surprised. My last conversation before we got on this call was I talked to somebody that was very nervous about this, and I said, "Listen, man," I think Florida State's going to be in. I said, I don't see how after that performance by the defense, 13-0 and winning 2 games with backup quarterbacks. I said, but I do think that I agree with Bob. I think this all came down to what happened in North Alabama game at the end of the day.
Yeah. The one thing I'm going to say is that if you're Alford and you're looking at this situation and you're looking at future stuff, you got to sit there and say, we can't, playing in the ACC is not going to help us anymore. Honestly, what's to say even with 12 teams that they just don't pack it with the SEC teams no matter what? I think they have to be proactive and get out of this conference or Florida State's going to have a hard time selling recruits on that you could come here and win a national title. I just think it hurts their program a lot that they got pushed out for this. But that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. It's fair to say, especially from like a recruit. I mean, as much I don't necessarily disagree with you, Fish, but I mean, if we want to bang the drum of like you got to get out of the ACC. I mean, the ACC this year, like you go down the records, there's what 7, 8 bowl eligible teams. Like
what does that matter? What does
some
that
down
matter?
the middle.
What does that matter?
Well, I mean, clearly that's what the committee is now showing with the final rankings here. But I mean,
but Nick, you just had a team go undefeated, and you're saying, "Hey, listen, you're going to go now play in a meaningless bowl game."
I know.
I just think it's not fair. You just said that football, that's a team sport, that the other 21 guys that busted their butts for 12, 13 weeks don't matter. That defense, Jerry said, that's one of the best defenses in the country. They're a top team. They beat LSU. They beat Clemson. Like, you're basically telling this team you're not worthy. I think it's you're showing something wrong.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I feel bad for those kids. I feel even worse for those coaches. I mean, this, you could say what you guys want, but this could come down to now where Mike Norvell is a head coach. He may like Florida State. He has a reason to leave now. It has ramifications that I think go beyond just today. I think it could hurt their program.
I feel bad for the kids. I feel bad for the coaches. But it's, again, this is I hesitate because this is the first time that this has happened. So it's not like we have something to look at to where it's happened before, and we notice trends developing, and I guess fans and media can process, I suppose, like the ramifications of this. You kind of get what I'm trying to say. It's like it's some unknown gray territory.
Let me ask you this question, because Mark brought it up a couple of days ago. He mentioned the fact, and this was, I can't remember whether we probably talking about the playoff and the playoff rankings. This was either a week ago or 2 weeks ago. He mentioned the fact that he thought it might work against Florida State that they played against so many backup quarterbacks this season. Do you guys think that had any impact on how the College Football Playoff Committee ended up getting Florida State to number 5?
I think I would say this: if Travis doesn't get hurt, this is all a moot point.
I agree.
Yep,
I agree, because
you guys don't take this to the world's coming to an end. It's a setback for sure. I don't want to overreact.
Jerry, even when he was playing, everybody, the narrative was that this team wasn't good enough to be in there. Listen, it was everybody, whether it's Joe Klatt or any of these national guys. I listen to them every week, and I'm like, what are they watching? The same football team I'm watching? And every week it was like Florida State was not even considered to be among the top teams, even when they had Jordan. It just seemed ridiculous. You talked about it with Jordan being in the Heisman race, and they weren't even going to invite him to New York. So like I said, I don't think it would have mattered. I really don't. I think they have this bias towards the SEC, and I get it. I mean, I deal with these coaches all the time. It's a great conference, but it was down this year. All right, it wasn't a very good conference compared to years past, and I get it.
The ACC won 6 out of 10 games against them. So,
yep.
To answer your question, Pat, just I'm thinking back about the quarterbacks. If the question is like, does Florida State playing so many backups, did that hurt their case in any way? Well, let's think about it. Riley Leonard, I don't think it's necessarily backups. I think it's more
quality quarterbacks.
Quality quarterbacks, I think there. Riley Leonard played hurt. Garrett Schrader was hurt. The Miami game, Emory Williams starting was a decision by Cristobal, and frankly, it should have been Van Dyke. That was a horrible coaching decision by Cristobal.
I agree. I told
you guys say that, but if he hadn't sat Van Dyke, the rest of the team was going to quit on him as a coach. There was upheaval in that locker room with this guy continuing to play and them losing games. And that's why he made that decision to play him. So.
And that very well may be true. And then there's Griffiths, starter at Wake Forest. Then there's Velour at Pitt, who was also the starter. So it's not necessarily backup quarterbacks.
Well, yeah.
It's lesser quarterbacks, but even still, that makes the argument as to why that would affect the final ranking like even less. Like you can't necessarily.
But the criteria doesn't say, hey, you can't make the bowl games. I mean, the playoffs. If every starter on the team, like. That's not part of the thing. Florida State play the teams they're supposed to. I really don't think people take into account how difficult it is to go undefeated. I mean, Jerry can tell you this, Nick, because he's been following Florida State a lot longer than all of us, is that how many great teams did Florida State have? You go back to the 97 team with Doug Johnson and Noah Brindise switching. That Florida State team was better than this Florida State team. It was one of the best Florida State teams, and they lost a game.
You're showing a live look. They're showing a look in right now.
They're looking at the offenses.
Yeah.
And the offenses were better. I'm not sure those defenses were better.
They just showed Mike getting up to address the team after they got the news. I don't know if anybody had the.
I feel horrible for him, man. Honestly, for this guy has gone through so much, taken over a program that was just hit the rock bottom, getting COVID, not being able to, and to get it to where it is. And this is what he sells these kids on is, hey, if you come to Florida State and we do this, you're going to play for a national title. And it's very disheartening for those kids in that room. And the coaches, the work they've put in. You guys have seen it firsthand more than I have. I'm not there every day. I've seen it from an outsider. I wasn't sure at the time if Mike Norvell was the right guy for the job because he came from a program that really, he came from an area that really he didn't have ties to Florida. I was skeptical about it, but man, what he has done at this program and what he's made Florida State, is truly remarkable in such a short amount of time. I mean, you look at all these schools. Florida wants to get rid of Billy Napier after 2 years. They would have wanted to get rid of Mike Norvell in the same situation, because if you look at Norvell's record after the first 2 years and losing to Jacksonville State, Florida State was patient. I really, truly believe, I've said this, I think FSU as an administration, also from a booster standpoint, they really let the coaches develop and build these programs and not just hit the panic button when stuff goes wrong. And today, everything you built up for was destroyed, I think, in this moment. And I don't think I'm overreacting. I think a lot of people will probably feel the same way.
Yeah, listen, I think there's going to be a ton of disappointment over the next couple of days. But I will say this. Listen, if Mike Norvell can bring back the program from the depths of that Jacksonville State loss a couple of years ago that you've referenced, he can bring this team back from this. Listen, this is a huge listen. Jerry and I talked about it for the last 3 weeks. We've told everybody from a professional standpoint, keep an open mind because of what could happen with the committee. From a personal standpoint, and being around that team all the time, being around these coaches all the time, I'm disappointed for them. I mean, and as a Florida State alum, I'm disappointed. And as a guy that's got somebody, a family member on that staff, I'm hugely disappointed. But this, from a professional standpoint, Jerry and I have talked about it with Kurt and Bob and Nick for the last 3 weeks. Guys, keep an open mind because you don't know. These are human beings that are making these decisions, aided with some data. But at the end of the day, and as I said, we all have biases, both known and unknown to ourselves. And those all those things played into what happened. But to your point, Fish, is it a setback? I agree with both you and Jerry, but I think this is something that Mike Norvell, one of the great things that he has done since he's been here is keep this program moving forward. He never looks back. I mean, and I think, you go ahead, Fish. I'm sorry.
Pat, when he goes in a home now to recruit a kid and they're going against Alabama, it's going to be used against them that if you go to Florida State, you're probably not guaranteed to make the playoffs.
Listen, they go to 12 next year, so he can offset that argument.
What's to say though? They have 2 losses next year, and they're it's the same.
Let's not have two.
So they got to go undefeated in a 12-team playoff to make the playoffs. So
I don't think that's true.
Man.
I don't think that's true. Listen, you're going to see teams with 2 and 3 losses get into the playoff with a 12-team playoff, and that's how you sell it. Listen, we got left out. It was unfair. That's the reason they've gone to a 12-team playoff. Listen, kids still want to go. I know NIL has become a bigger factor than it's ever been, and you have some kids that are making decisions off NIL alone. But I still think kids want to go where they can win. One thing Mike Norvell has proven is that he can win, and he can win big. What are they, 19 games in a row right now they've won? And listen, I know that, I saw a lot of tweets out from the Florida State program about the 19 wins, and that was a great narrative to push because no one's beaten them in a long, long time. But I think this is a short-term setback. You've still got a big bowl game to play for. You've got a really talented team. I think somebody said on here that they didn't see anybody, didn't feel like many kids, if any, would back out of a big-time bowl game, which they're probably going to get Ohio State or Georgia, was what I would think. We have not seen the bowls come across yet. But, listen, I think it's hugely disappointing. I think the disappointment that we feel and the disappointment that I feel knowing somebody in that building, it's got to be tremendous. I would not want to be in that room right now. I mean, that's just but this is a strong team. We hear about the culture, the brotherhood. These guys will find a way I firmly believe that they will find a way to bounce back from this. And to Nick's point, you got 15 practices before you go to your bowl. The offense should be better, no matter who's playing quarterback. They know what these guys can and cannot do. They've got a better feel for it. And Mike's shown against Louisville that he's going to find a way to work around that deficiency, right? We saw him go to the Wildcat. But, yeah, I think it's a huge setback, Fish. I just think it's a temporary setback.
If you're a player on Florida State, why play in that bowl game? I mean, I know really at the end of the day, it's it's a meaningless bowl game.
Well,
What,
I think
because it's an
I
orange
think,
bowl. I mean, you think the
I
kids
think
care about
I think
that?
that
Yes.
I think some of them
Absolutely,
do.
they
Yeah,
do.
listen, I think
All
there's
right,
a,
well,
there were
I'm sure
several
their agents are going to tell them, listen, sit this game out.
There were and I'm sure Jared Verse's agent told him not to come back last year, and he did. And I think listen, when you enjoy playing, if this was a team that did not enjoy being around each other and playing with each other, and listen, it's not going to surprise me if a player or two doesn't play in the bowl game. But I don't think Braden Fisk is going to say, hey, I'm not going to play. I think it probably gives them a little bit more of a stinger going into whatever bowl game they're going. We're going to go in here because now what you're selling is we got to go prove the College Playoff Committee wrong on January 1st or whatever the date of their bowl game is. But yes, listen, it's hugely disappointing.
And claim a national title.
Yep. So
I absolutely agree.
I mean, listen. This since Mike's been here, it's been one setback after the other, and he keeps moving the program forward.
Yes. Yeah.
They're not wired.
No,
like
I understand. Listen, Jerry, I understand that. But you know what? If an SEC job comes open next year and they're going to sit there and say, hey, you come here, you can win a national title a lot easier than Florida State. It's going to be used against them. You could ignore it, but
of course it is, Fish. Anytime you're in sales, people are going to use anything they have against you. But what you have to do is look at the positive of the program you're in and what you can do to get better. It's a 12-team playoff next year. FSU is trying to move out of this conference. I mean, everything you're asking, Fish, is FSU is trying to do.
Well, they need to do it quickly. That's all I'll say.
Well, listen, they can only do it as quick as one of those other conferences allows them to do it. I mean, that.
Yeah, they need to call they need SMU boosters to step in and help them move out of the conference.
Yeah, listen. Here, I would make this argument with a 12
Listen,
team.
Pat, I need to sign off.
Okay.
Jerry kicked his dog when he saw freaking Alabama pop up on that thing, man. All right, that dog took a beating on that one.
All right, guys. See you later.
All right.
See you guys later.
Thanks, Jerry. Hey, all right, guys. Well, listen, we're gonna wrap it up. Listen, it's obviously a great season for Florida State. 13-0 ACC champions. Has met every challenge that they faced this year. Unfortunately, the College Football Committee did not see it that way, and we believe the reason for that was Jordan Travis's injury. At the end of the day, Florida State will still play in a big-time bowl game. We'll get that matchup a little bit later today. We are anticipating that it'll be Ohio State or Georgia, which will be a tremendous game. But certainly, listen, it's been a hell of a season to cover Florida State. It's been one of the funnest I can remember in a long time, and the trip's not over yet. One more big game. But listen, it's a disappointing day, bittersweet day for Florida State coming off a 13-0 season. 12 hours ago, they were just crowned ACC champions. They're going to have to readjust. I think Mike Norvell will get this team back refocused, and I think we'll see a very fired-up team in whatever bowl Florida State plays in come the end of December, 1st of January. Nick, Fish, any parting thoughts?
Coming from both professionally and as an alumni of the school, just Florida State fans are not going to want to hear it right now, but this was a resounding success of a season for this program, for the culture that Mike Norvell has been trying to build, for the type of team that he's been trying to build, and for the future of this program. To have not only back-to-back 10-win seasons, but to go undefeated, win your first ACC title since 2014. I know that I believe that if you told a Florida State fan at the beginning of the season that you would win the ACC championship, I think everybody would be thrilled. Now, obviously, everybody is always going to want to have higher aspirations and to compete for a national title. And, what the ramifications of being left out of the playoff have yet to be seen. We can only give our knee-jerk reactions about what this means and what will happen moving forward. But I think for for what it means to be a Florida State Seminole, for what Mike Norvell and the coaching staff and the players want this team and this program to be, this season was a resounding success. And I think that the brotherhood that they have, I think that the maturity, the confidence they have as a football team, no matter who's starting under center, they are going to go into that bowl game, whoever it is, trying to prove a point. And I think that no matter what that result is at the end of the day, this has been a resounding success of a season for this program. And I know Florida State fans are not going to want to hear that right now. And it's absolutely a disappointing travesty that they were left out. But, it's hard to react to something that's never and process something that's never been or never happened before,
Fish.
Well, I mean, one, I look at this situation is that it's a disappointing situation for those guys. Like, to me, at the end of the day, I'm going to go on with my life. Things move on. That's just how I am. This has nothing to do with me. I think that the work that Norvell and that staff did, they should have been rewarded. And they weren't rewarded. They were not rewarded for the season they had. They went undefeated. Not many teams go undefeated.
Nope.
And you're changing the criteria. All the goalposts keep getting moved back at what you're looking for every one of these years. And this is the whole reason they got rid of the BCS and they got rid of all the other stuff it's still the same.
Well, listen, it's always been imperfect, and even when we go to 12 teams, it'll still be imperfect.
But you've taken the college fan and you've put in the NIL, and you're paying kids now, and these coaches are making millions of dollars. Where is the fan left in all of this? You basically just crapped on a fan base that it feels like they're already everything's against them anyway. I think it makes it sour for their taste. I feel bad for all of those people. As well, it's a sad situation, but it's a business. That's what this has become.
Yep, there's no doubt about that.
And it's sad. I think it's sad that the sport it has become pro sports. Let's not kid ourselves anymore. It's not college football, and college football's changed, and I don't think it's for the better for these guys. So.
Yeah, well, listen, it's hugely disappointing. I really thought I knew this was always a possibility. Nick has started our conversations over the course of the last several weeks, and I always thought this was a possibility. I did not think after last night, the way that defense played, I thought it was a national championship caliber performance by the defense. I thought that might be enough to get them over the hurdle, over the obstacle that was Jordan Travis' injury. I think at the end of the day, when we start to hear the explanation, that's what it's going to be about. But to Nick's point, this was an unbelievable season, 13-0. To Fish's point, it's as a person who's worked at coaching high school and then football operations for 10 years at the college level, it is very difficult to win a football game. And Florida State, despite whatever adversity it faced in any given game this year, won all 13 of them. I do think it dilutes the regular season when you have a P5 team that's 13-0 and does not get in. I don't know what else they could have done outside of Jordan Travis not getting injured. So, but it's been a tremendous year. I am disappointed for every player on that football team, for every coach on that football team, for every person that's on the support staff. It's got to be a hard day for those guys. And as a Florida State fan and a Florida State alum, obviously disappointed from that standpoint too. But I do think that I think the rest of us will need to do the same thing that Mike Norvell is doing with his team, getting in the eye what's next. It was a tremendous season with a disappointing end in this way. And listen, and you're right, Nick, no one's going to want to hear any rational thoughts or why they didn't make it. I mean, that's not the environment we live in as college football fans, right? It's what we love about it. We all love our teams. It's almost a religious experience, college football, particularly down here in the South. And listen, every Florida State fan believed that Florida State should make it. Every Alabama fan believed that Alabama should make it, Texas, so forth and so on. There was going to be two fan bases and two teams that were very disappointed coming out of this game because I thought there were legitimately 6 teams that deserved consideration for one of those 4 spots. And unfortunately, it didn't work Florida State's way. I think all of us had Florida State in our rankings bear that out. I don't think anybody on our Osceola staff left Florida State out of the playoff. I know that's true. I did the rankings. We all had them at 3 or 4. So disappointing end, but I think we should congratulate this team on giving us a season that all Florida State fans will remember. It has been so much fun to cover this team. And the good news, guys, is it's not over yet. Still one more game to go. Listen, Nick, Fish, appreciate you guys joining us. If you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. Bob and Kurt are working on stories right now with reaction. We'll have a lot of news on this later on today, including where Florida State will end up in a bowl as the bowl selection process starts to carry itself out, as they are just now talking to the head coaches from all 4 playoff schools. But we hope you will join us to continue what has been a perfect season for Florida State. And they still have a chance to go 14-0, which I believe has only happened one time at Florida State. Nick, am I right on that? So,
sorry, what was that? Say that again.
So they still got a chance to go 14-0, which I believe would be the second or third time in the program history they've won 14 games. So still a lot to play for. We will all process this throughout the day, but I guess if there's any way to take comfort into, you got your team finished 13-0, ACC champions, definitively one of the top 4 or 5 teams in America, despite what the College Football Playoff Committee thinks. It just unfortunately did not go Florida State's way today. I think we'll all be upset about it for a while, and then we'll all move on to the next thing because that's all we can do. But listen, my heart goes out to those guys in the Moore Center, someone that's been involved in this sport for a long, long time. Those guys work really, really hard, just like all those other schools.
Thank Auburn.
Yeah.
Dude, thank Auburn.
Yeah. The Gravedigger has one more it's got one more connotation to it now. Because if Auburn had played that play a little bit better, Florida State is definitively in. So
4th and 30.
It's kind of crazy. They've played over 800 snaps, and at the end of the day, this is coming down to about 2 snaps. Jordan Travis's injury and what happened in Auburn, Alabama, as Fish reference, and probably a couple others. But hey, guys, let's keep our heads up. It was a great season, great year for Florida State. Still got one more to go. Go to theosceola.com to check us out. Appreciate you guys listening and hope everyone has an enjoyable Sunday.
You guys did a great job, man.